Hi, I'm Stephanie Panay, and welcome to some more reflections on A Course in Miracles. Today, I'd like to discuss envy, mainly based on an essay that I wrote for this book, The Farthest Reaches of Inner Space. Uh, the psychoanalyst Melanie Klein spoke a lot about envy. It was her big deal. Here she's pictured with her dark-haired rival, Anna Freud, and though they look pretty friendly here in the presence of a cat, they did have some heated arguments. Both of them were known for their pioneering work with children. However, Klein controversially introduced the idea that envy operates right from infancy as we find ourselves dependent on powerful others, that is, our parents or primary carers, to meet our needs. According to Klein, infants relate to people as objects that either fulfill their needs or deprive them. Envy comes about when we feel angry that someone possesses and enjoys something that we want, and this elicits an impulse to destroy what they have. It's like a kid seeing somebody make a really nice sandcastle on the beach and running up to it and just stomping all over it. Shakespeare's Richard III is another prime example of an envious person, unhappy to see other people's goodness and prosperity. King Richard III was marked by a physical deformity, which in Shakespeare's play causes him to lament that he couldn't enjoy seducing women and other so called sporting tricks. Feeling cheated by nature, he decides to be a villain and spoil all that is good. Here's a bit of his speech. But I, that am not shaped for sportive tricks, nor made to court an amorous looking glass, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world, scarce half made up, and that so lamely and unfashionable that dogs bark at me as I halt by them. Why I, in this weak piping time of peace, have no delight to pass away the time. And therefore, since I cannot prove a lover, to entertain these farewell spoken days, I am determined to prove a villain. Richard's words highlight envy's standing on the outside looking in nature. We feel unfairly deprived and left out, leading to a compulsion to possess or destroy what others have. And through the psychological process of projection, the world becomes a fearful place where we expect the same back from others. This reminds me of an experience that a friend of mine had who went overseas to visit her Greek relatives. When she was at their home, she noticed a strange thing. Every time she complimented something in the house, a plant, a picture, and said that it was lovely and how much she admired it, her Greek relative got very uncomfortable and kind of, dismissed the compliment and seemed very uneasy with it. After a few of these occasions, my friend asked her Greek relative, look, I noticed that every time I compliment something, you kind of get uneasy with it. And the relative explained that in her culture, when people compliment something, there's a kind of a superstition around this. When people complimenting something, there is the belief that underlying that compliment is a curse, that that thing that they've now complimented is cursed because that person secretly wants it or wishes that they could have it. And so it's a kind of an attack if somebody admires something. So what is also part of the custom, though this relative didn't go this far, was to then spit on that object that's been admired to somehow break the curse for it being so desired by somebody else. Klein says that the opposite of envy is gratitude. She saw that gratitude stems from an experience of inner wealth and that this depends on an appreciation of our own goodness, that we have within us what she calls a good internal object. This is an object that transcends any feelings of hate, greed, or envy. Klein's idea that envy comes from feelings of inner poverty is consistent with A Course in Miracles. The Course suggests that our feelings of incompleteness, unworthiness, and helplessness, these are all engines of envy, result from believing we have separated from a loving Creator, that we don't have a good internal object. The Course's creation myth is like the Adam and Eve scenario because it centres on a conflict over authority. According to the Course, our suffering comes from an egotistic desire to have, well, more power than God, or to be our own boss, to set up on our own as if we have authored ourselves. All fear comes ultimately, and sometimes by way of very devious routes, from the denial of authorship. The offence is never to God, but only to those who deny him. To deny his authorship is to deny yourself the reason for your peace, so that you see yourself only in segments. This strange perception is the authority problem. Envious of God's status as author, we attempt to live our lives apart from him by establishing a separate, ego-driven will in opposition to God. Saint Augustine, the person responsible for the doctrine of original sin, wrote, "Souls in their very sins strive after nothing else but some kind of likeness of God." In his book Confessions, St. Augustine describes how, as a child, he joined with a group of boys and stole pears from a neighbour's tree. He didn't want the fruit itself, but enjoyed the act of stealing because it made him feel omnipotent, all-powerful. This memory led him to reflect on what caused Adam and Eve's defiance of God. It was, said Augustine, Adam and Eve's envy of God, their desire to feel all-powerful themselves, that led them to defy him by asserting a separate will. The thing is that in going our own way, we eventually feel empty and helpless, because by estranging ourselves from God's oneness, we estrange ourselves from the wholeness and security of our spiritual self. The Course's way for moving beyond envy towards gratitude involves letting go of judgment. Hot on the heels of envy is the judgment, "it's not fair." And behind that judgment is the idea of an unjust God, a parent that has deprived us, a parent that doesn't have a regard for our happiness. This is what the ego would have us believe about God. The answer is to not judge our lives in terms of what goes on in the outer world, to not judge our circumstances, to not judge those of others, and to not compare. The ego always compares, whereas the Course tells us the Holy Spirit accepts. The Holy Spirit accepts that the only purpose in any situation and the only meaningful thing to do in any situation is to use it as a means for practicing forgiveness. And that involves remembering our shared interest and our innate equality on the level of spirit. If we know that no matter what our circumstances are or how we measure up to others in the world's eyes, God's will for us is perfect happiness, as the Course states in Workbook Lesson 101, we needn't fear God's will because we share it, as Lesson 102 goes on to say. And if we really connect to that idea, we will experience gratitude instead of envy. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time for more reflections on A Course in Miracles.